Hello and welcome to Live at 5. We have a really inspiring guest for you today, so welcome.
Yes, and it's brilliant to be here. We're out on location and we're joined by author Lis, who is phenomenal. So Lis, welcome to the show. We love having you on, and it's been great. I'm usually sitting by here whenever we do. I feel really like I feel kind of out of place.
Well, at least you're close.
I know, I feel kind of off put, but it is
It's
lovely.
very cushy.
Yeah, it's very cushy.
It's very cushy.
Yeah, and it's a lovely, lovely occasion.
It is.
And I got your name right because
Yes.
it's the Scandinavian. So it's Lisbeth
It is.
McDermott, and you are the girl with the dragon tattoo.
I have got a dragon tattoo, yeah.
Now, I've read your book, the latest novel, which is your debut novel,
Yeah.
which is called He's Not Worthy. And I must say, it got me hooked from the first chapter. It's got
good.
many twists and turns. It's in a little cottage. The way you describe the people in the book is just making you feel like you're actually in the set of the,
thank you.
book. So it's fantastic. But
That's
tell us...
not easy to do, actually.
No, it's a really hard thing to do. And some authors just grab
Don't
it,
get
I think.
Yeah,
But
some just don't get it.
Te-
I've
well,
read books where they just didn't get that.
yeah. So first off, really, because you've written a lot of books, so tell us how you kind of got into becoming an author.
I started out when I was actually working in education, because I was in education for 34 years, and I wrote with another girl a music scheme for schools. But I didn't think of myself as an author because it was work, and it was sort of just part of that. Then when I changed careers and became a photographer, I wrote a book about photography. It was about headshots. But I still didn't think of myself as an author because it was business. So it wasn't, creative in my head. Then the person I was with at that time for publishing had a competition for a short story anthology he was going to write. And I put a short story in, having not written anything fiction before, and it got in the book. And I was like, woo! So I wrote my own book of short stories. Then somebody else asked me to join their writing group, and they set a writing task to write a short story about a pair of glasses. And that didn't float my boat at all, but I wrote a poem about it. And I wrote a sort of a funny poem. And that started me writing poetry again. So I ended up, I've written a book of short stories, an autobiography about my husband and I. I've done about 4 poetry books, and now the novel.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's incredible. But you don't only write books, right? You also help other people write books.
Yeah, I do.
Tell us a little bit about the structure of a book, right? Because it's a difficult one to kind of get your head around, especially as someone who hasn't written a book.
Knowing where to start.
It's just, where do you start, where do you finish?
There's a lot of contention about how you should write a book, to be honest. With my novel, I just went for it. I've got the story in my head. I have to walk around with the story in my head for ages and sort of thinking about it. And I tell friends and anybody that wants to listen to what the story is. And as they tell it, there's bits that don't quite fit, so I know that's got to be altered. And when I'm ready, and that is really strong in my head, I start writing. Now, some people will tell you that a book should have a certain arc, and it should have like certain shapes, and it needs to go here and go here and go here in this part of the book. It's what they call beats. I'd written nearly most of my book, and then I read something about that, and I thought, I've not done that. So I showed it to another friend who had written a novel, and she said, it's fine. And then I read something else, and they said it differently. And they said, basically, you should have 3 things happen that upset the story, and then something that ends it and pulls it all together.
Oh, okay.
So that's how I sort of aim for, but I don't, when I'm writing, I'm not going, I've got to write this bit. Some people do plan like that. I can't. I have to just tell the story. And that's the way I do it. Everybody does it differently, to be quite honest.
So tell us a little bit about the makeup of the novel. Give us a little bit of a brief of what this is.
It's contemporary fiction, and it describes it in some blurb that my publishers send out as a dark romance collides with dark something. I can't remember, but basically it's about obsessive love and inappropriate love.
Oh, wow, okay.
Because some people have been a bit unsure about the fact that there's a teacher, and it says this on the back, that there's a teacher who falls in love with one of her pupils. So in some minds, people's minds are like, shouldn't go there. So, but So that's what. So basically, the teacher, she's called She's Rhiannon Dobbs, and she's a head of art at a secondary school, and she falls for this student Josh Campbell, who is in the sixth form, about to leave school. And if they'd just waited till they left school, wouldn't have been so bad. But anyway, so and then there's Ben Brooks, who is a loner, and he is obsessed with her, and he's stalking her. We know that, as the readers, we know that. We have that input into him. And as he gets more and more upset as the book goes on, because he sees her with this young boy in his eyes, he's not happy, and so things start to happen.
Giving me the shivers now because I remember it. But the characters are just so fascinating. Now, I've spoken to you about your next book, and that kind of shows me that you have that whole story in your head, because you've done so much research. So how do you start when you're starting to kind of, you get the story in your head and you know you've got to do, because you've got to do a lot of research before you put a book out. So where does that come in, and how do you think about that sort of thing?
I have to do that before I start writing, because when I'm doing my research, so for example, the book I'm writing now is based on my grandfather's brother. My grandfather's brother on my mother's side went down on the Lusitania. And the Lusitania was a ship that was torpedoed during World War One, and it was a passenger ship, and sort of 1,200 people died, and it just went down off of Ireland. And so I wanted to write sort of their story somehow, because they didn't have any children. She survived, he died, and she died in the 1950s. So it's not about the Lusitania. I've changed the name of the ship and I've made it a story, but I wanted something to happen to him rather than him just sinking and getting drowned. I wanted something to happen to him.
Very Titanic.
Yeah. So I sort of thought of all these things, and because that's happening in World War One, and I want it to happen, the story to be in the now, because I'm not a historical writer per se. So I've got to involve ghosts. So I spoke to Samantha Jane. Samantha Jane, because she's obviously an expert on that, and I know nothing. So she had helped me with that. And then I talked to another friend who's very keen on history, and he was saying stuff about World War One, and there was something I'd wanted to have happen, and he goes, "No, well, that wouldn't have happened then." I was like, "Oh, okay," because I wanted I'm not going to say actually much about the baddie at the moment, but anyway, it's something I will say it's to do with Sweden, and I wanted him to link up with some other people, and at that time these people wouldn't have existed. So your research is important, and people don't think that you need to research for fiction, but you do, because for me,
people need to relate, I guess.
Yeah, and it needs to be in reality, because if I was writing fantasy, I could make up everything. But if I'm writing something which is based in reality, I need to make sure that it could happen.
I think that's really important.
Yeah.
And I think it always, because I love reading books, and I'm not sort of into historical books, but I really love books that have elements of history into it. And I wouldn't sort of sit down and go, "Oh no, that didn't happen, so I'm not going to read that book."
No.
The Island is a typical example of that, with Victoria Hillsop.
Yeah.
And she got lots of things right, but a few things wrong, and people go, "Oh, that's wrong and that's right."
It's
funny
enough, I'm not a book reader, but I do like playing games, and actually it's very similar in gaming, especially some of the games that I like playing, which are all historical games, and I like the element that is history in there.
Yeah.
Right, we've got literally 1 minute left, so let's talk a little bit about your other books. So we've got, you got a poetry book?
Got 4 poetry books.
Okay, cool. And where can they be found?
They're all on Amazon. All my books are on Amazon.
And do they just find you as the author?
They put in Lis McDermott, and if they put in He Is Not Worthy, the book for that, the novel with Lis McDermott, that will probably come up because it's the most recent.
It does.
And then if you hover over my name, it takes you to my page, and all my books are on there.
Fab. We'll put a link to the page in the comments below as well, so people can track those down. But if anyone is looking for you, like specifically, how can they find you?
They can find me on See No Bounds, obviously, and they can also find me on my own website, which is www.lismcdermottauthor.co.uk, and remember the Liz is spelt with an S.
Fantastic.
Fabulous.
Well, it's been fantastic having you on the show.
Thank you.
And talking to you about your books. As someone who likes books, but I'm not a bookworm.
I can't wait to read the next one.
Yeah, and someone who will literally read a novel in a week. It has been fantastic to have you and just get inside the mind of an author. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's all we have time for. Until next time, take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Hiya and happy Thursday. Today we are celebrating Getting to Know Your Customers Day. Yes, it is a really important day. And I decided to invite over one of our experts in this field, which is Carol Avanatis. And I apologize if I haven't said that completely right. Avanatis from Newland Mystery Shopping. How are you, Carol?
I'm very well, and I quite like the way that you say it. Actually, I might go with that from now on.
Name is of Greek origin, isn't it?
Yes, Greek.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. I love the name. But we're here today to talk about customers, and it is something that should be so simple and should be something that we all know, but actually it can, for many business owners, be the hardest thing. So how do we, first of all, how do we get to know the customers? What would your sort of, why is it important to get to know your customers from your point of view?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Charlotte. We all know it's important, don't we? It's obvious, really, that we should know our customers, but we don't. We don't always take the time to find out about them. And as you were saying earlier, we sometimes win them and we think that's great, and then we don't sort of care for them afterwards or think about their needs. So I think we need to know more about them for all sorts of reasons. We need to know about their wants, their expectations, so that we can make sure that we're meeting them. We need to know about their behaviours so that we can try and predict what they might do next. We need to know whether they're happy with us or not, whether they're likely to come back to us, or whether we need to adapt in order to fulfil their expectations better. We need to know about them so that we know how best to invest our money, whether to start doing some training or to move into another area of production or service or whatever we happen to do. We also need to know about our potential customers, what sort of people are most likely to come to us, and therefore how do we direct our marketing, our branding, our social media, etc. So I think, there are a whole myriad of ways, of reasons why we need to really sort of get under the skin of our customers.
Yeah, it's interesting you say so. A little fact, I think, is 13% of unhappy customers, we share the complaint with 15 other people. That's how quickly it can sort of spread if you have an unhappy customer. And that's why I think we touched about how easy it is to win customers, but how something can go wrong and you can lose a lot of customers. But one thing that I think is really important is that if something goes wrong, it has happened. And some people that I have worked with have kind of hidden at that time. Now that for me is the worst thing you can do, to hide away from the problem and not resolving it. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it's the old adage, isn't it, that you should see a problem as an opportunity. And actually there is I noticed this from a paper that Ipsos, a very big market research company, wrote recently about actually introducing a little problem, a little ripple into the whole sort of customer process, just to give you that potential for doing something about it and proving how well you resolved it. Isn't that weird? I mean, to actually try to cause a problem in order to show that, that you can solve it and that you really care about solving it. Because sometimes you can have an ongoing relationship with a customer and nothing happens and it just all works very well. And they say, yes, thank you very much. But it's sometimes only when there's a real problem that you have the opportunity to show that you will bend over backwards, that you will move heaven and earth to put it right. And then they think, wow, these people really do care about me.
That's really interesting, actually, because it happens a lot. It happens a lot in hospitality, which is my background. And when
Yes.
you bend over backwards, if something has gone wrong, it can be anything. It could be that a meal wasn't done the way they wanted. It could be literally anything. If you resolve it in the best manner and kind of really make them feel looked after, you will win them forever. Usually that's usually the case. So I want to touch a little bit about what you can offer as well, because as a mystery shopper, you often come in, and that's the scary part, I think. And I think that's why a lot of people don't get to know the customers, because they're scared that they might get negative feedback. So tell us about the positive experience that can happen by having somebody like yourself doing mystery shopping with the company and the benefits.
I will. But I think I would like to say, first of all, that mystery shopping, much as I would love everybody to do it, it's not the only way to know more about your customers. There are a whole load of ways, and mystery shopping is one of them. And mystery shopping sort of replicates the customer journey so that you can observe what's happening along the way. But there are lots of other ways which I can go through if you'd like. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Because I think because obviously you have to spend money on mystery shopping or any form of market research, but there are lots of things you can do yourself. Just using your own data for a start. So sort of figuring out from your own data, what do you know about them? Especially if you have a lot of customers like you do in Seen Advance, put them into groups, segment them and work out, well, okay, so what are most of our customers are in the service business or are in the B2C side, or most of them are in the wellness area, because that gives you a lot of clues as to how you should progress forward and who is most likely to come to you in the future. So I think using your own data, first of all, is really important. And actually, I think a lot of people don't do enough with it. Equally, there are things like your own complaints. If you're that big that you have a complaint, looking at those can be really, really useful. Looking at engagement with social media. So what are people saying about you? What are they asking you on social media? That gives you a clue to where they're coming from. And looking at reviews of especially if you're in hospitality or something, looking at all your reviews, not just ignoring them. It's okay if 100 people in the last 3 months have said the food was cold, then you know that you've got a problem. You need to do something about it, and that's for free. So you don't always have to spend money to find out more about them. But I think if you are going to spend some money to find out, there are lots of easy market research ways of doing it through doing easy, customer surveys, sort of, out of 10, how was it for you? Those sorts of things, or comment cards, that type of thing. They're all good and very, very cheap, and you can actually do them yourself in a way. But they sometimes give you the sort of polarized version. So the people who are either very, very happy or the people who are very, very annoyed. You don't get that sort of large bulk in the middle. Equally, you can just phone them up and talk to them. Obviously, it's always good to try and get close to your customers and have a good relationship with them, but actually asking them how they feel about you and whether they're likely ever to move, those sort of more difficult, crunchy questions, they won't always tell you directly. And so going through a market research agency that is neutral and will anonymize their responses, they will be much more honest. And there are loads of different forms of market research, and mystery shopping is one of them. It's a great one, and I encourage people to use it, obviously, but there are lots of others. So there's a standard sort of survey that you can ask online, say. Obviously you have to think about GDPR, but then there's qualitative. So there are online boards, they're like focus groups online, where you can have people, you pay them something for it, but they will come in on those online boards for maybe a week, and you will ask them lots of different questions, and you can go to so you can sort of direct message them. So if one particular person says something of interest that you want to explore a bit further, you can observe as a client. And then they will also interact with each other, and they'll talk about what it is. So they might talk about, they might be small businesses who want to talk about which online community they like best. And there is a whole mass of fascinating information that would be generated which, for example, CNO bands could use in moving your business forward. But then there are also really fascinating things like videography, ethnography, where you use video to actually observe behaviours. There's things like semiotics, which is looking at behaviours within the context of the culture. So things like, colours and text and fonts, sounds, that sort of thing, as well as obviously mystery shopping.
It's a whole world out there, isn't it? I really love what you said about, there's so many things. You've given some really great golden nuggets of that you can do yourself. So, for example, like you were saying about putting people into groups. And I think the most important one that you need to do is to realize that all your customers will want something different from the experience. If we talk about the live shows, for example, not everyone will use the live shows for CNO Bounce, but they use it to connect with other businesses and other services. And that's the importance. So it's kind of realizing that, people use it for different reasons, and finding out about that you can only do that by speaking to your customers. So
absolutely. And I think small businesses often think that all this sort of strategy stuff isn't for them, but actually it can be. So there's some fascinating work being done in behavioral economics now, behavioral science, things like nudge theory, where there are little changes that you can make, little aspects of a sector that you can put into place to gradually get people to think slightly differently. So obviously, all the climatologists are working on this at the moment, trying to work out ways that they can nudge people into acting slightly differently, which will help the planet. And I think small businesses can learn from this. It's not just for the big corporates.
No, definitely not. And I think that we can learn a lot from what the corporate kind of offers sometimes, in terms of, because they got access to so much data and statistics that maybe as a small business owner you might not have. So looking at behaviors of the corporate companies can sometimes really help you as a small business as well. So what are the best ways of getting to know your customers? What would you say are the best ways?
Well, as I said, it's looking through your own data, seeing what you've got yourself, and then talking to them. I personally think that a more qualitative approach is better than a pure quantitative one. So if you simply ask people out of 10, how was the experience for you of joining CNO Bounce, say, of going through the process of filling in the forms to get yourself on the website, how good was it for you? And they say 7. You have no idea what the extra 3 were. What didn't get you the extra 3? But if you actually either go through it with them, either accompany them on their journey and watch them doing it and see where they have a problem, where they decide to stop and go and make a cup of coffee because it's too difficult, or where they start, massive numbers of keystrokes because they just don't know where to go next, or where they should look.
It actually happened to me, this. And when I was working within the online auction house for fine instruments, and we sold her violin for a lot of money, and she wrote me this amazing email saying how happy she was with the service. So when somebody was, very happy with the service, I said, if you have a moment, would you mind to give us a review? And she gave us a glorious review, but only 4 stars. And we had all 5-star reviews. And so that dropped us down to 4.9. And I thought, that's very strange, because, and I remember she was a doctor something she was. So I emailed her back, and I thought, because she was abroad, so she was best to contact via email, which is also a really good thing. I think you need to find out of what is the best way to contact the client. So I emailed her back and I said, I know you gave us this glorious review. I just wanted to find out what we could have done better to reach the 5 stars. And she went, oh, I'm sorry, I should have put 5 stars because I was absolutely over the moon with the service. I just don't ever give full marks.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, okay, so there was nothing we could have done better. But she just was a person who doesn't give full marks. And I thought, please just change this to the full mark. But there are people out there who will never give the full mark in a survey, and who will just be very happy. But like you said, if you don't ask, and it's ways of asking as well, isn't it? You know, but if you don't ask, you won't know what the other 3 points would have been to make it a really, really good experience.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly. And again, I think it's that thing about putting your customers into groups. So there will be some of your customers will be in a group where they're just very laid back and they think they're very IT savvy, and they're perfectly happy to just work through it on their own, and they totally get the concept of the community and they don't really need any hand holding.
yeah.
And that's one group, which it means that you can just plow on and make your tech even better, you know, and it's easy. And then there will be another group that maybe are very poor with their IT skills. They don't really understand how to do things. They don't even understand the language you're using when you say, in order to, you know, to become a member, you have to do this, this, and this. They might not even understand that. And so that turns them off. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think absolutely putting your customers into groups and then figuring out what each one requires and how you need to alter your approach for each group is a really useful thing to do.
And being able to explain as well. And one other thing I wanted to touch on is that going back to hospitality, I used to have a rep coming through just to catch up with me. And he always turned up at 12 o'clock when you're about to start lunch service. Now, that is something I think is majorly important, to find out when is the best time, not, you know, to contact your customer, and how often should you contact your customer? What are your thoughts around that, Carol?
Well, again, it's knowing them, isn't it? It's about knowing them. It's about getting into their shoes. I mean, how can you? You can't just sniff the air and work those sorts of things out. You've got to find out. Why don't you ask? You know, if that's a thing that you need to contact them regularly and you don't know what time, then ask them. You know, that's simple.
I remember I just wanted to run and hide in the end, because it was like, no, we're about to have so many people walking through, and in comes the rep, and you think, surely when you are a rep within that kind of line of business, you should know better. But you know, there's so many things we could bring up in this, but I think it's a really important day, because we are scared. It's our baby, and we don't want to hear anything bad about our baby sometimes, you know. So, but picking up that phone and getting to know your customers, I think, is really, really important. So, I
think so. And also, Charlotte, the thing is that most people don't like to say negative things directly to people. So, you didn't want to say to that rep directly, "I don't like you coming at 12 o'clock." You just carried on, but probably you wouldn't buy from him because you just didn't want to engage with him anymore. And if only he'd asked you, you know, he would have potentially got the business.
And it can get to that point, can't it? If you don't ask the questions, and sometimes by outsourcing that as well, you get actually much more honest, anonymous answers, which is less pressure. So can you give me some examples of great companies who really do know their customers?
Well, I think we all can very easily think of companies that are not good, can't we? Those ones who keep you hanging on the phone for hours and hours and hours, or just don't seem to care about you. But actually, there are a lot of really great companies out there who have listened, who've clearly listened to their customers and have turned themselves around, you know, after figuring out what their customers really want. I mean, some examples would be, for example, someone like Uber, who looked at the sort of pain points of someone who wants to hail a taxi in London. You know, when you're in a not very busy area and you have to wait for hours and hours and hours to hire a black cab. And so they completely changed that round. And actually, when you look at some of these companies who really have listened, they're often the disruptive ones. They're the ones who've totally changed the market. They've moved the goalposts completely in a sector. So I think Uber's a very good example of someone who's brought a totally innovative solution to attack a problem that people had. Another one would obviously be Amazon, you know, who have just, I mean, they've raised the whole sort of online experience to dizzy heights, where they really do listen, and they feed back, you know, information that you might not even know about yourself, you know. So, you know, if you order a book that you actually ordered 3 months ago, but you just forgot, they'll tell you, isn't that brilliant? They won't just take your money, they'll tell you because they've got all that information about you. And
but they really manage the customer journey. Excellent.
Absolutely.
Which is a lot of things that we can take from that as a small business owner selling products and things as well, I think, from that company, from the bigger corporate companies, because they make it very, very easy to return something as well. And all of those processes kind of need to be in place, don't they? So Uber is an excellent example as well.
I think, Amazon just make everything easy, don't they? So I sometimes go to the computer and I think I want something. And I think ideally I'd like to go and buy it from a local independent. But then that means I have to do some research and find out who sells it. And they might not actually have an online platform. And I'm busy and I need to go and start tea or whatever. So I think I'll just go to Amazon. That's the whole point, isn't it? They just make it easy.
Yeah, and there's a lot we can learn from that. So
yes.
Any other examples that come to mind?
Another one that comes to mind is Adidas, who started making shoes from waste from the ocean. So they were making great shoes that were really cool, but also listening to the whole sort of cultural shift in wanting to save the planet. So making people feel good about not only wearing cool shoes, but also saving the planet. So again, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I've recently it's been in the news about Coldplay because they're doing their whole new world tour. They're still going to fly. They need to fly to various places, but they're doing a huge amount on their of their footprints to save the planet as well. And I think that will follow. When a band like that takes that charge, other people will follow and want to set another example. So it's a lot of things like that I think we can listen to as small business owners, of setting an example and making that customer journey really easy. And
it made me think, who in the Sino Bands community is best at listening to their customers and knowing their customers? Who is most disruptive in your community? They're really interesting questions, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
I'd love to know.
I will keep that for another time, Carol. It's actually just made me think, but the great thing about the community is that people talk within the community, and with the Facebook group and things like that, people do really give each other support. And that's, I think, that's what it's all about. And I think that's the difference from many other business directories and so on, that we do listen to the customer, we listen to the feedback, and we listen to what people are sort of shouting about on socials and trying to make that customer journey really easy. And if somebody is not very techy, like you said, they don't have to go through a system where they press 1, press 2, press 3. They pick up the phone and there's always somebody there. And I think that's a lot to learn from bigger companies, because there's nothing more frustrating than sitting in a queue for 15-20 minutes and then having to tell your story to one person, then to the next person, and then to the next person. And it just goes on to the point. I actually had this the other day with an auction house, and my experience within the auction world is, vast, because I worked with an online auction house for 5 years, and it was so frustrating. And you just kind of I was absolutely fine with the conversation, but because it went on and on and on, I then felt like nobody was listening to what I was saying. And I felt like just putting the phone down and never speak to them again. And that's a horrific customer experience. And it's little questions that they could have done in the meantime to turn that around really quickly, but they've lost my business forever. And that's how quickly it can happen. And I think that's the importance of sharing what we shared today, to be honest.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, Charlotte. And
maybe I should send your number to this
yes, please do.
I'm really grateful that you joined me today, because I think it's a really good way of looking at how do you actually look after your customers. And if you would like to use any of the services, Carol can put you in touch with various companies.
Yeah.
Or if you think that mystery shopping could be for you and you want to find out what your customers are saying or what your staff are doing, then get in touch with Carol. So obviously you can find Carol in the best business directory in the world, seeinabout.co.uk. Where else, Carol, can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Very easy to find because not many people have my name. Or the website newland.co.uk. And also I am part of a market research directory. There are lots of small scale independent market researchers who have loads and loads of experience. So if anyone has a particular need in a sort of specialized area, get in touch and I'll make an introduction.
Fantastic. That's really wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your special golden nuggets for us today. And do go out there and look after your customers. Thank you everyone for watching. And if you have comments of how you do it, then we like to hear. Just do replay and put your comments in the box. That's all for us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely afternoon.